everyone. Welcome to this MEF Connects webinar. The title is Omnichannel in the Contact Center, Real World Lessons from the Experts. I'm Tim Green, I'm the features editor of the MEF, and I'll be moderating today's session in the company of two experts. I'll introduce them in a minute, but first some housekeeping. Today's session is going to be about 45 minutes long, and we'll be recording it, and we'll also write a blog post to accompany it, which we will share on the MEF website and on MEF social channels, so you can forward that to anyone who's missed the session, or if you want to watch it again. Please ask questions at any time during the session. There's a Q&A button at the bottom of the screen, so use that to ask questions. I'll keep an eye on it throughout the session, so I'll either feed those questions in as we go along or keep them till the end, but either way, I'll definitely make sure that they're asked. So I'll be keeping an eye on that. Okay, so on to today's session. So we're talking about Omnichannel, which is, for someone who writes for a living, a horrible word, which I don't think any fan of the English language is a particular fan of, but it is actually a useful word because Omnichannel is very important these days to brand communications, and it's often misunderstood and confused with multi-channel. So it is important, and we wanted to bring it alive on this session by applying it to one particular vertical so that we can really see how it affects customer interactions and also the way staff work. So we've chosen the contact center, which is probably the sector which is adopting this omni-channel with most enthusiasm and probably doing it first. And obviously we're in the COVID era and it's taken on even more importance and because of that. So to do the discussion, we've got two guests here, and I'll ask them to introduce themselves. So Tom, over to you first.
Right, yeah. Hi everyone, my name is Tom Barkan. I'm the Director of Product Management in Vonage. Vonage, for the one who don't know, it's one of the most flexible communication platforms in the world. We have also unified communication application, contact center application, but we have one of the biggest API communication platform. I'm part of the API group. My role is I'm leading the portfolio of voice and conversations, voice API enabling contact center to build actual contact center, programmable contact center with our building blocks. And the conversation is actually kind of an omni-channel piece, which help us to connect context between channels. And contact centers is very main focus for us. It's one of the first kind of adapters to this omni-channel experience that we offer.
Thank you, Tom. And Tom is joining us from Israel, where he is currently locked down in some kind of detention. We won't go into that. Anyway, and over in Germany, we're joined by Matthias. So Matthias, can you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi. Hey, everybody. This is Mathias Muehlfelder speaking. I'm basically working for Syniverse. My role is a Senior Director Product Management, and I'm responsible within Syniverse for our enterprise solutions and offerings. And our communication platform as a service, our CPaaS platform, is basically a part of that. Syniverse is the world's most connected company, and we are basically reaching all the phones globally. And we help enterprises in order to get better into contact with their consumer base and get customer experience and everything up through that.
Okay, so I'm going to stick with you, Matthias. So let's get into definitions first. So as I said, omnichannel is often confused with multi-channel. So we have a communications world now where we've got so many different ways of getting in touch with a contact center. What's the difference between multi-channel and omni-channel in that context?
The way we describe it and we defined it as Syniverse is when you think about multi-channels, right, it's really having multiple channels at choice. So meaning, you know, you have one channel which can be voice, you have another channel which is SMS, you have another channel which could be MMS or Facebook Messenger or something like that. And basically, as it's a multi-channel, you as the customer or as the contact center, you pick the channel of choice before you start the conversation. So meaning once you start a conversation via voice, you do it via voice, right? Once you do it via SMS, you do it via SMS. And I think the real cool thing on Omnichannel is that it's basically holistically across all of these channels. So meaning you start a conversation by SMS, but now you need a representative and now you need to switch to a voice call. That's then possible, right? And this back and forth in between channels, that's exactly what we define as Omnichannel.
Okay. And Tom, why would you think that the contact center is a particularly hotspot for omnichannel?
So I think like every brand is communicating with these customers on different channels. You know, we're talking about, you know, the traditional voice or even fax channels, but think about, you know, all the social channels like Twitter and Instagram and all the new channels coming up. And I think for contact center agents to give the best kind of experience for customers and to make sure the context is passing between those channels, to make sure they give the best customer experience and the best service, they need to have an omni-channel solution and to need to have all the information passing between those channels. Otherwise, you know, every one of us kind of had this frustrating experience when you're calling a contact center and talking with one agent or texting with one agent, then talking with the other agent, explaining the same problem again. It just you know, it just making you choose another brand or choose another company, right? So those kind of experiences will be much more seamless between those channels when use omnichannel, when you use it right. And
let's list. Maybe give us an idea of what channels are available then to the contact center these days. What channels of communications would they be offering to customers? Tom.
So yeah, so of course, voice are still one of the main ones, right? Voice, email, all those kind of the traditional ones. But we see a lot of growth in the WhatsApp as a channel because WhatsApp opened the API a year and a bit ago. So we see that growing very fast. Also, video is starting to grow in the contact center, especially those days when everyone works remote. Of course, social channels as well. Many of those channels, and I think like, you know, every kind of messaging application will be part of the channels contact center. We need to be kind of supported.
Right. And Matthias, what from your observations, what would be, is the contact center still dominated by voice, or how would you think about the balance of the different channels that are available?
So that's an interesting question. And I think, you know, the most of the contact centers are still using for a big portion still voice. However, you know, it's really that more and more these messaging channels basically come into play, right? So, and it's basically driven from multiple factors. So if you look at industry statistics, I mean, you know, 90% of the people would expect an SMS chat or a messaging chat, would pick a SMS or a messaging chat over a voice conversation, right? So meaning there is really a demand from the consumer side. And that's why a lot of contact centers are really investing into it, right? And so we see a huge demand also with brands we are interacting with, that they want to offer more and more things. Now it's rolling out, right? Some customer pick some channels first and then expand it over to other channels and make the whole omnichannel experience bigger and bigger. But it's really expanding these days, and the channels are, when you talk to the consumers, really important in order to make a difference in customer success and so on.
What's driving that preference for SMS, do you think, over voice?
I mean, you know, it's all of the things what comes with messaging, basically, right? So first of all, you can reach out to somebody, and then so from a pure consumer side, right? This contact center person, the agent, your brand you're interacting with, they can come back, and you can come back whenever it suits you, right? So you don't need your phone, go away for something, dial into an IVR menu, being stuck on there for the next 15 minutes waiting line and constantly need to listen. It's basically the asynchronous method of communicating, right?
Yeah.
And then I think that's with the strongest argument. The other thing is, you know, think about what other benefits it gives you, right? So with or without a chatbot doesn't even matter. But if a contact center agent is now sending you a link in order to look up something, right? Or is sending, Tom was talking about WhatsApp, you're sending a picture, you are sending a quick voice recording or a quick video, you can go back to that description all the time, right? Think about your cable internet is broke, and you want to fix it, right? So, but you can't remember what buttons the agent said you should press, right? Now you have it on your phone, you basically can go back, see the pictures again. That's a huge advantage and a huge customer comfort. And I think that's why it's driving so much next to the items of, I don't have to wait for an agent to pick up, you know, I can communicate asynchronous, don't need to wait. Those are, I think, the fundamental items what drive the change.
Do you have any sense of what proportion of contact center interactions are asynchronous in that sense? I mean, obviously some customers, they need an answer to something and they need to have a conversation in real time about it. Others, as you say, it doesn't really matter if it takes a half an hour for the response to come back. Do you have a sense of, with a balance between those two?
I don't have a percentage number, but I'd say for the most, I mean, so going into our own statistics, right, and looking at the brand experience we have, there are a lot of customer care use cases where it's typically okay that a conversation is asynchronous, right? And what we also experienced is if something really wants to have a live conversation, then they request to switch the channel, right? Or do something like initiate a call back. That's what we often implement, right? So you basically say, hey, call me back, and then whatever the next call center agent, which becomes available, he calls you back, and then you have a real conversation with a human in order to solve your problem, right? So, but I'd say, given a percentage number, I'd say something like 60–70% of the messages are these days totally okay to be asynchronous.
Yeah, and it's interesting that also there's this implication that customers really don't want to speak to somebody; they want to self-serve. I suppose you just want to solve your own problems. That's human nature, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's also, I think very important when you, as somebody driving a contact center, what you really should think about, right? So the one thing is, of course, having these multiple channels of choice, having this omni-channel selection. But the other thing, and that there's a lot of, call it digital transformation, education and consulting what comes into it. But think about customer use cases holistically, right? So don't think about just a customer care use case, because when you just think about solving a customer care problem, but you then, break the line, and then afterwards, your omni-channel experience is not available anymore, that's breaking basically, the customer journey, the user experience. And I think you're also breaking a lot of good momentum you can create with a customer, right? Because take the messaging example again, you can now go back after you think you solved the problem. You go back one day later and say, hey, we had this challenge together. Did you work through it? Is it resolved? Do you need another call? Do you need more guidance? And what we also saw is that this really drives customer loyalty. And this is, in the end, what all brands are after as well, right?
And so, Tom, Vonage is a company that is very strong in voice. So how do you see voice being integrated into this universe where people would prefer messaging and like to self-serve? So what role does voice play in that?
So I think there's two approaches to that. So one of the approaches that is voice is not dead yet, right? Like most of the contact center is still voice, and also voice is it is better for a different type of communication. Think about all the use cases of people have sensitive information. People wants to have a discussion with an agent, and not just to have, for example, there is use cases which classic for messaging like deliveries, right? Or logistics. When you want to know when your delivery is coming, and you don't need to speak too much with the agent. But if you have any issue with, let's say, with your internet provider, and you don't know what to do at your home, so you want to solve it fast, so you need to have agent online helping you. Or if you are, let's say, take the healthcare industry, if you want to talk with a doctor, so you need to talk with an actual agent, if it's usually also on video. So those use cases still happening, and I think it's not one kind of eating the other. I think it's going great together, and that's the omnichannel piece of that. I think it's kind of, let's say, escalation of the channels, of the reach of the channels. Think about starting for messaging. If it's not working, you escalate it to a voice agent, then you escalate it to a video if you need to do a screen share, if you don't solve the problem, or stuff like that. So I think it's kind of about escalating this escalating channel, and again, and keep the context. That's the most important thing in my opinion.
So Tom, let's talk about how a customer care center, whether it's in-house in a brand or a specialist outsourced agency, how do they go from being, let's pretend they're very basic and they really just have a voice, a bunch of call agents with headsets and they're just doing voice. How do they go from that to having a multi-channel, omni-channel integrated system? What's the I mean, presumably first they need to move over to CPaaS in some way, but maybe you could explain what the process is.
Yeah, CPaaS or application that supports all of that, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, we saw a couple of, you know, huge on-premise contact center who started with small things like with chatbots. So they have chatbot for the simple solution, and if you want to escalate, you're going to an agent. So the agent still having the same kind of environment he used to, is just getting more information about what happened, what was the discussion between the chatbot and the customer. So he gets kind of information before the call, which helps him kind of navigate the call. Also, we see customers who take this kind of information and helping for the routing selection of the agents based on skills and stuff like that. So that's kind of, I think, the first step, adding those kind of messages and chatbots and etc. Also, we have customers that using voice bots as well, kind of kind of replacing the agents or trying to help them manage the situation before actually getting the real agent. That's how they have better experience with the customers. Yeah.
And Matthias, maybe you could tell us a little bit about the integration process. So a contact center wants to move over and really, you know, become an omni-channel place, then what kind of integration is needed, and what sort of timescales are they looking at?
Timescales is, we made the experience that timescales really often differ. It depends on whom you're talking to, right, and how complex the environments are of those companies you're talking to. Connecting to a CPaaS platform, right, is really fairly easy, right? So I mean, that's why CPaaS became so big, starting with SMS, but now, you know, expanded across multiple channels and other features and functions. But it's really easy to interact with. It's normally a REST API, right? Kind of every standard web developer can very, very easily connect with. So there you got your starting place already, right? So you can send your first messages regardless of channels, going back and forth. I think the interesting, and so this can be really fairly quick, right? So it can be, I mean, I don't want to say a matter of days, but, you know, it can be a matter of days if the company trying to do that is really, you know, putting all efforts into it. What we typically do is we also look holistically at what these companies, the brands, the enterprises, the contact centers have at other environments, right? And you typically need to integrate them, or we call it, we need to orchestrate a solution what fits to this entire environment, right? So you have probably, you know, somebody has an integration with an CRM system, and I don't, you know, want to promote the one or the other, but there are CRM systems out there. There are other SaaS platforms out there, and so on. And you basically, when you have a chat with somebody back and forth, you want to make sure that what you now communicated with this person is basically recorded somewhere, right? Or there needs a data warehouse connection to be built. Then it can be also a multi-month project, right? But the very original, hey, you know, get going, use those messages, and basically, as also Tom mentioned it, probably put a I call it a simple chatbot behind, right? What goes through the, you know, 1,000 FAQs. That's a matter of weeks and can be really done fairly easy and fairly quickly with the modern technologies.
And from an agent point of view, so hypothetically, there's an agent that has got a screen in front of him or her, and they're taking phone calls all day, and now suddenly they've got for the sake of argument, they've got a screen that's got a WhatsApp option, an RCS option, chatbots, web chat, voice, video, MMS. How do they, you know, how do you go about implementing a system that is easy for the agents to understand?
I mean, what you need is basically you need to all put that back into one system, right? So you cannot have whatever 17 chat windows open, and now if somebody switches from WhatsApp over to MMS for whatever reason, right? Let's say data connectivity drops or so. You want one screen where this all goes into, right? And that back to the implementation question you had. That's exactly, you know, where it's starting to get a little bit complex, because you want to interact with those systems that the contact center agent basically sits in front of one system what handles all their calls, all their messaging traces, but also gives you insights about what a chatbot probably communicated already with a customer about, right? Because you don't want to break that when the customer is handed over for whatever reason. Then you don't want to start all of this question again, right? So you want to have this info. So there needs to be one system in order to keep a good control over it. But I think another important aspect is that I think the job of a contact center agent also will slightly evolve over time, right? As AI becomes more important, as chatbot become more important, the best persons we identified in helping to train a chatbot basically have been the contact center agents, because they know all of that stuff and they deal with it day in, day out. So meaning, you know, it's now also a chatbot trainer function, which is the contact center, and they do a lot of training for the chatbot to make the chatbot more intelligent. But then over time, of course, you know, let the chatbot do the hard work or the most of the heavy lift, right? But when it's then a real customer escalation case, then step in and have the time to do that, right? So that's how we see it evolve right now.
I mean, the cynical view of that would be they're training chatbots to take their jobs away from them. But I know that that's probably not the case, because you would say that they're just free to do a different kind of job, right?
Exactly. I mean, we hear that a lot, right? And of course, I mean, I totally understand it. People are afraid of those things, but it's really like I said, right? So, I mean, communication gets more and more interactive with all of the brands we are interacting with, right? And I think I saw somewhere a statistic that in a few years, only 20% or so of the interactions of a consumer actually hit a chatbot agent. But you know, who needs to build these conversations, right? Who needs to build all the, in IVR, we would call it trees behind it? Who builds the logic, right? So a chatbot company can certainly help you with AI, but what your customers are demanding, that's what you need to tell the bots, right?
Yeah.
But it comes with a big advantage. Now it has scale, right? Once the bot is trained, now you have scale.
And Tom, what's your experience of how the agents' jobs are changing, and how CPaaS companies are presenting the information to them so that they can do their jobs better?
I think like CPaaS is kind of the perfect solution for that, right? Because every contact center can actually customize their own view for the agent, their own UI, basically, because they're building their own application. They take the building blocks from the CPaaS platforms, and they'll be able to build whatever, and even A/B test and kind of play with it until they get the right UI for the agent for his actual work. For the agent side, I see, it can get much more information when he used to get. When we have all those channels available, when he has all those information, as we're talking about information, what happened before in the history and etc. But there's a lot of other metadata. For example, if a customer call, exactly, what's a subscription and stuff like that. You know exactly when is the last time you called them, when is the sale for the customer is being happened and stuff like that. So all this information can help the contact center agent. It will probably make them more active. They will need to be more kind of doing this two things at a time, scrolling the history, getting those own information and talk with the customer in the same time. But in the other hand, think about all the on-premise contact center, when after the call, they needed to manually type the call information into the CRMs. And today, with everything connected, with recording, with call transcription, all of that, it's saving tons of times for them. And it's saving tons of the discrepancy between what actually happened and what's the agent reported later.
Yeah. What kind of savings are possible? Obviously, the motivation for moving to Omnichannel is a better customer experience and presumably more efficiencies. So do you have any idea of what kind of savings are possible in terms of cost per call made or cost per call received or whatever when you move across to more automation and more self-service and so on?
Yeah, sure. If you're saving agent time, you're saving a lot of cost, right? Most of the cost is probably the actual agent sitting over there. The cost of the calls are pretty cheap, and also the messages. If you're having a better customer experience, you're getting faster to a solution for a case, you probably will have lower cost of messages, calls, everything, right? Workforce and etc. So all of that will save a lot of money and time for the contact center, for the brand itself.
Matthias, do you have any insight on cost savings, efficiency, and so on?
Yeah, so we did some statistics, right, out of the use cases we powered to our customers, and it's interesting because there is a huge span across how much you really save and whatnot, and it's basically driven out of some of our customers are basically having contact centers in the US and are powering all of that out of the US. So meaning you have really high labor costs, right? Others have this completely outsourced to offshore locations where the labor cost is at least radically lower, right? So, but to give, I think, one of the best numbers we came up with, we experienced that a contact center agent can roughly handle 5 to 7 chats in parallel. For several use cases, and if you apply that and apply some other metrics and so on we had put on top of it, we saw savings up to something like 80-85% in the very, very best cases. Right, so it's extremely stunning. Of course, there was a chatbot in behind, which many questions didn't go through, and the customer also, frankly speaking, started with us a digital transformation strategy. So meaning it was really, that a contact center agent picked up every other call. So meaning, but 80-85% is what the best results showed, and I think that's very, very stunning. But there is a huge range.
To what extent to stick with the agents for a while, how much work do the agents have to do in terms of interpreting the information they get compared to how much the software will do for them? So I probably haven't explained that very well, but let's say for the, we were talking earlier about bots, and there might have been a bot conversation that happened before the customer went over to voice. So when they go over to voice and the agent picks the call up, do they have to read the conversation and then do some work mentally to work out what's happening? Or can the system itself say, this customer, wants this, called at this time? Are they presented with information by the software, or do they have to work it out themselves? Matthias?
So the most contact center software is designed in order to give you all of that information right in front of you, right? So, and the chatbot, the integration and so on really needs to fit perfectly into that the contact center agent has the most of the information available. Again, as Tom said, right? So, the history, the call statistics, if the customer is probably satisfied or not. If you go one step further and, you listen to really the rock stars in the AI technology creating chatbots, they even can figure out just out of the tone, right? Somebody is typing, the style somebody is typing, if that customer is really angry, if that customer is really mad at you, and basically then you also get a thumbs up or a thumbs down in order to, get an indication how to deal with that customer and probably how to make it better for the customer, just, getting this feedback. So I think the secret sauce is to get as much information as possible presented to the contact center agent, but to get the really important information filtered out. And for that, the AI component in a chatbot is really important, right? It's not just the answering machine and somebody typed, whatever, network down, and then you present an answer back. It's then also that once you get to the contact center, that this contact center agent now understands out of these 20 conversational chats back and forth, that it's not a network problem, but that the router doesn't work anymore, right? And so he can immediately jump on it. There's a lot of AI needed in this. Again, back to my point, that's a lot, what training, that's a lot where training is required from the actual agents in order to identify it correctly and present the relevant information. That's our experience.
So Tom, let's carry on talking about AI, because there's Matthias has just raised that exciting idea that an AI can actually detect sentiment and not just give the agent, the facts of what's gone on, but also maybe the state of mind of the caller and so on. What have you seen evidence of this, and where else can AI go in improving the experience?
Yeah, I saw evidence of that. You have the most famous one for Google, kind of sentiment analysis that you can see, you can play with it and see exactly how it works. It works pretty nice. The things about AI that I think needs to be kind of tuned to use case specific. At the moment, all the AI solutions that were very, very generic was a bit like with a lower percent of successful, but the one that was tuned to a specific use case were better. So if the use case is scoped and focused, it will be easier for the AI to cope and to understand and to take the right decisions.
Yeah.
The next thing I want to add about what Mathias said is when the AI, or when you know to classify the conversation, or when you know to classify the actual reason of the customer contact the brand, you can do the routing decision to the right agent, which is maybe sometimes be super efficient and super helpful in the flow and the customer experience. Because you know, most of the time there are different skills and different agent, different language and stuff like that, right? And saving this time, it saves, you know, it's actually sometimes even better than having the agent reading the whole history, just getting the thing that is actually experts on, and not like a request of a technical request and it's a sales agent or a marketing agent, right? It doesn't know what to do with that. So those kinds of things can help.
I know that's something Syniverse is working on, that kind of intelligent routing to the right expert, or conversely, finding the right channel for the customer, the system that the customer prefers. Is that correct, Mathias?
Yeah, that's correct. So we put a lot of effort into you know, modern BI analytics software and so on, in order to figure out, you know, which are the preferences of the consumer and of the customer, right? So, and it's quite interesting because you see patterns which differ across the world, right? So meaning, if you have customers, I take the obvious examples out of Asia, they will be using WeChat much over a WhatsApp conversation, right? And in US, it's again different as it is in Europe. And interestingly, what we also saw a lot is that basically people are reacting on different channels in different reaction times when you compare daytimes with night times, right? So meaning at the night times, they probably, you know, sit on the couch and whatever, you know, on their iPads, just type something back very, very quickly via a Facebook Messenger, whereby during the day, it can be totally okay, you know, that they use a specific app still on the phone or the live chat button on a website, because they are anyhow in front of the PC, right? And back to the whole topic of the webinar, that's why I think we all agree that omnichannel is really important, because if somebody starts doing a chat via a website, but now needs to shut down because whatever, the bus leaves, or you know, he needs to hit the train or something like that, but then continuing this conversation, that's exactly where the power of omnichannel hits in. But you need and you want the AI, I say, the BI, the business analytics on top of it, in order to understand who does what, and then influence even the, now call it call flows, message flows back with a optimized preference management. This customer, Tom, he always reacted on WhatsApp. So I now have something, let's reach him on WhatsApp rather than, you know, trying to send him whatever, an email where he will never read it. Something like that, right? So that's very important.
And you mentioned WhatsApp, and with the OTT channels, are they starting to be adopted now in contact centers, or are they too targeted? You know, and also there's obviously Facebook and so on. They have their own. They all have different policies on terms of what's allowed, you know, and what their strategies are with businesses. So, how do you see the future of OTTs in this space?
The OTTs are becoming more and more important, right? So as also mentioned earlier, WhatsApp is one of the top OTTs, right, where a lot of traction is right now going on. So meaning that's really making a huge difference, and we see a lot of adaptation in that space. But again, right, so in other areas, other OTT channels are becoming also very, very fancy. It needs some time still, right? So I think, you know, it's getting more and more popular, and often people fall back to also a standard text message or something like that. But OTT is becoming really, really important. And then I may, you know, switch into this, but what we also see, and it's not fully there and fully baked yet, but RCS is getting a lot of traction as well, as basically being a native installed app on the phone. So meaning RCS, I think over time will really rock that next to the OTTs as well, because it gives you the same capabilities, but it's natively installed. So that's perfect, right? So that's a perfect target for the contact center industry in order to have the conversations with.
What about you, Tom? What do you think about RCS? We've had a few questions on that from the audience. So are you confident as well that will become the kind of default for contact center interaction by messaging?
Yeah, I'm not that familiar with RCS. I'm more focused on the voice side in the business and stuff like that. But I know that the customer needs to, the customer wants to interact with the brand in every channel that is the easiest for the customer. So if RCS will be a channel that customers would like to use, of course, every contact center will need to adopt it, like WhatsApp and like Line and like Viber and whatever OTT channel it is. Yeah. So I don't think it's going to be different than any other channel. But again, contact center, we need to have more and more channels, which is also explaining the importance of how you're building your solution and how you're building your solution flexible, so you can add channels in the future. Let's say, who knows, maybe in the next 2 years, we're going to sit here and talk about holograms, that we are speaking with holograms with each other, right? We don't know. But if it's going to be a channel, the contact center need to be able to react fast and edit. And that's the most important thing.
And is the migration towards omnichannel going to change the nature of the contact center? Obviously, we're speaking in the middle of a pandemic where people are all working from home. Is it going to accelerate the movement towards making contact centers virtual, so that basically you don't have a big building with people in it anymore? You can do it from anywhere. Is that already happening?
Yeah, I think so. Especially with we see the huge ramp up in video and using the video API. Right? People building contact centers and have a contact center with video, so people can interact from home and stuff like that. I'm sure that the rest of the stuff also, when we are talking about IP voice and contact center over IP and not over the regular PSTN lines, which everyone just with an internet connection can open their browser and connect to the contact center from whatever they are. All those things will, and of course the OTT channel, all those things will help the agent work from whatever they want.
Is that something you're seeing with your clients, Mathias? Are they starting to have virtual contact centers, as it were?
I've been told they also try to move towards virtual contact centers, but the most of the contact centers I have seen was really around people still more or less in the room. So I think there is a huge wish to move to virtual contact centers, not to have to bring everybody together and so on. And I think, the pandemic shows it, right? So because we now had to adapt to all of that overnight, and we had several, change requests from customers in order to accommodate a few of those needs. So I think, that's giving us a push into this direction. But out of our experience, my experience, I often dealt with real big contact centers somewhere in country or offshore based, where really hundreds of agents are sitting.
And to come back to bots, do you think that when this omni-channel contact center reaches real maturity, that virtually all conversations will be with bots, and that all queries will be resolved using a bot interaction that has multiple media in it, video and so on? Would you see that as being the future of the contact center?
If you ask me, I think this is coming wherever. I think we need to be careful to say everything is then done and handled by a bot, right? So it needs to be done intelligently. I really think there is a lot of difference you can make to your customer also with doing a bot really well versus doing it just for the sake of having a bot, right? And you want to walk the fine line in order to, of course, also benefit from the automation aspects and all of it, but you don't want to push that too far, because then you end up easily in this IVR kind of menu, right? Experience again, like press this for this and this for that, which people basically resignate fairly easy. I think it needs to be a good mix of the right medium, and I think that the advantage we have at the time we are in right now, we are beyond voice, and so therefore we can pick the right channel and the right media for the right problem, and so therefore it will be much better to the consumer. But I don't think that everything needs to be handled to be by a bot, because that I think that's that's too much the other side. That's too much the other extreme. I think there needs to be a happy medium in here.
What about you, Tom? Do you think? I mean, you're as we've established, you're a voice company. Do you think that bots will become the main source, the main way to communicate? And what about voice bots? You know, things like the Google Duplex idea, for example.
Yeah, voice bots and chat bots will become more and more. I still think it's per use case. Again, if the use case is simple and you want to get an answer, it will be very simple to do it over the voice bot. But if you have some emotional discussion about something up, and let's say you call the council because I don't know they didn't pick up your garbage or something like that, and it's happening over and over. You want to talk with a person, you want to share your emotion, you want to share your disappointment with the brand or whatever. So those kinds of stuff will keep happening. Of course, the bots will cover in the chat bots or the voice bots, whatever it is, will cover the simple use cases. But then, you know, the more complex use cases will be able to kind of get more and more attention and get a more better kind of customer experience, better kind of attention from agents and etc.
And do you think we could have voice bots as well, where you're speaking to an AI basically, and you don't even sounds like another human? Is that coming?
Yeah, of course. It's not. You still notice it's a robot, right? You don't. It's not sounds like a real human yet, but it's in a really good position. If the use case is very focused, so like I know that Duplex they kind of presented it as booking a table in a restaurant, which is super focused. Right? You want to book a table in a restaurant. So if the use case is that focused, I think the solutions out there are in a really good shape. And we as well, we have a kind of an AI company that we acquired a couple of months ago, and we have a solution that is in really good shape, and you can feel that it's doing the what it should do for instead of the agent and talking with the customers and etc. You still notice it's not a person in general. I didn't see like any solution yet that you notice it. Yeah, it's a person, and you think it's a person and you talk with a robot. But I think again, you know, as Mathias said about the chat channels, and that you don't want to speak with an agent. So maybe you would like to speak with this robot and do the reservation instead of speak with someone that was, you know, half focused on what you said, half not, etc.
Is your solution live, or is it just a proof of concept? It's live.
No. Yes, it's live in customers. We have we acquired a company called OverAI a couple of months ago. It's live, part of our UCAS solution, etc. We have a couple of customers using it. And
do you think we could get to the point? And this is something we've covered on MEF before, where individuals have their own bots, and then we have the situation where I instruct my bot to contact a brand bot, and between them they sort out they resolve the dispute, or they sort out the reservation and so on. Is that coming?
That's going to be amazing. You know, it's going to be doing all the work for us, right? Yeah, well, it can happen, right? It can happen. If you have a marketing bot call another, you know, IVR, which is automated as well with a bot, it can happen. I don't know if they're going to solve the solution between them. It will take a time. It's going to be in the space. But yes, it is possible.
Mathias, have you seen any evidence of that?
As you asked this question, I just had this one video in mind. I don't know if you know it, right? Where Alexa talks to Google,
right.
And now my Alexa is turning on here. Funny enough. See, now she says I didn't understand you. Oh my.
Right.
I didn't see it with customers or so. Being frank, it's nothing I saw yet. I think it's an interesting thought, but I did not see any evidence of that yet.
Well, I suppose it was that when Google did that demo of Duplex a couple of years ago at their developer conference, and you had a customer bot booking a hairdressing appointment, I think, and yeah, it just makes your head spin really, because you just think about a customer bot calling a brand bot, and can you actually hear that conversation? Is it even audible? And you could do a million of them simultaneously, of course. So it's quite a head scratcher, but it's certainly a possibility, I think. Anyway, I think with that sort of science fiction revelation in mind, we've come to the end of 45 minutes now. So thank you very much, Tom and Matthias, for your time today. I thought it was a great conversation. I wish you a speedy return from lockdown. And I thank everybody for viewing. And just to remind you that we've recorded this, so you'll get a chance to watch it again or share it with your colleagues in the next few days on the MEF channels. And we'll also write it up as well, so you can have a look at that. So until the next one, thanks again, Tom, Matthias. Thanks for watching, and have a safe evening and a safe weekend, and keep safe. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.